Hello friends, welcome to Crime Chronicles US, where America's unsolved mysteries, vanished criminals, and chilling cases come alive. Every story is real, every detail matters, and the truth remains buried in the shadows. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to stay updated with every mystery. In the early 1970s, Britain still clung to the illusion that aristocracy meant order, dignity, and control. Old titles carried the weight of centuries, and the men who inherited them were assumed to be different from everyone else, restrained by tradition, protected by privilege, and shaped by a sense of entitlement that insulated them from the chaos of ordinary life. Richard John Bingham, the 7th Earl of Lucan, seemed to embody that illusion perfectly. Handsome, tall, educated at Eton, moving easily through Mayfair clubs and country estates, he was the kind of man people trusted without thinking twice. He smiled easily, spoke politely, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that made others assume he had nothing to hide. Yet by the autumn of 1974, that carefully constructed image would collapse into one of the most disturbing and enduring mysteries in British criminal history. Lucan's life before the disappearance looked like a script written for him long before he was born. His family name opened doors automatically. He grew up surrounded by wealth and expectations, trained to believe that his place in the world was fixed and unquestionable. At Eton, he learned the unspoken rules of power and loyalty, how to keep emotions private, how to present calm, even when things went wrong. These lessons would later become unsettlingly relevant. As a young man, Lucan gravitated toward the elite social circles of London, spending long nights at gentlemen's clubs, gambling rooms, and private parties where money passed hands quietly and reputations were protected fiercely. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Lucan developed a serious gambling problem, one that drained his finances and eroded the stability of his marriage. He married Veronica Duncan in 1963, a union that initially appeared glamorous but quickly turned sour. The couple had 3 children, and as the marriage deteriorated, their home became a place of tension and hostility. Arguments grew frequent, accusations flew, and by the early 1970s, the relationship had become openly toxic. Veronica later described Lucan as controlling and unpredictable, while Lucan claimed that Veronica was unstable and dangerous, particularly toward the children. Their separation was bitter, and the legal battles that followed only intensified the animosity. By 1974, Veronica was living at 46 Lower Belgrave Street in London with the children, while Lucan was increasingly isolated, struggling financially, and obsessed with regaining custody. He believed, or at least claimed to believe, that the children were at risk in their mother's care. Courts did not agree. Each legal loss further fueled his resentment, and those close to the situation would later say that Lucan felt humiliated, stripped of control, and cornered by a system that refused to side with him. Into this volatile household stepped Sandra Rivet, a young nanny hired to help care for the children. She was only 29 years old, a working-class woman far removed from the aristocratic battles playing out around her. To the Lucan family, she was a practical solution, someone to help manage daily life. To history, she would become a tragic and often overlooked figure, caught in the crossfire of a collapsing marriage and a man on the brink. Witness statements and speculation, because the only person who could fully explain it vanished. Sandra Rivet was attacked in the basement. She was struck repeatedly with a length of lead piping. The violence was sudden and overwhelming. There was no sign of a prolonged struggle, suggesting that she may not have realized the danger until it was too late. The attack was brutal, efficient, and fatal. Afterward, her body was placed in a mailbag, weighted with stones, as if whoever killed her had already planned how to dispose of her. Shortly after, Veronica went downstairs to investigate noises. In the darkness, she was attacked as well, though she survived. She later said she believed Lucan was her attacker, identifying his voice and mannerisms. The assailant fled, leaving behind chaos, bloodstains, and unanswered questions. By the next morning, Richard John Bingham, Earl of Lucan, was gone. His car was later found abandoned in New Haven, with bloodstains inside and items suggesting a hurried escape. The discovery sent shockwaves through Britain. A peer of the realm had seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving behind a murdered nanny, a traumatized wife, and 3 children who would grow up in the shadow of a mystery that refused to die. Almost immediately, the narrative split in two. On one side were those who believed Lucan was guilty, that he had gone to the house intending to kill his wife, mistaken the nanny for Veronica in the dark, and fled when the plan went wrong. On the other were those who insisted he was incapable of such violence, that he had discovered the crime, panicked, and disappeared out of fear that no one would believe him. His friends in high society largely supported the latter version, closing ranks in a way that would later draw intense criticism. What made the case uniquely disturbing was not just the crime itself, but the disappearance that followed. People vanish every year, but aristocrats rarely do, and almost never under such circumstances. Lucan's face appeared on newspapers around the world. Sightings were reported across continents, from Africa to South America. Some claimed he had killed himself. Others insisted he had been smuggled out of the country with help from powerful allies. Every rumor fed the myth. Meanwhile, Sandra Rivet's story faded into the background. She became a footnote in headlines, dominated by Lucan's title and status. Her family mourned quietly, watching as attention focused not on the woman who had been killed, but on the man who had escaped justice, or at least accountability. As weeks turned into months, the investigation stalled. Without a body, without a confession, and without the suspect, there could be no trial. An inquest in 1975 concluded that Lucan had murdered Sandra Rivet, but legally, the case remained unresolved. He was declared legally dead decades later, but the questions never disappeared. The disappearance did not end the story. It only changed its shape. In the days following November 7, 1974, police worked through Lower Belgrave Street with growing unease. Blood evidence in the basement confirms Sandra Rivet had been killed there, and traces found upstairs told of Veronica's assault. The narrative that emerged was grim and methodical, pointing toward someone familiar with the house, someone who knew the routines, the lighting, the layout, and the vulnerabilities. Lucan's absence spoke louder than any statement could have. He had not contacted his children. He had not contacted police. He had not left behind a letter explaining himself. He had simply vanished. Friends of Lucan quickly began shaping an alternative story. They described him as calm, rational, and deeply concerned about his children's safety. They suggested that he had gone to the house that night to confront Veronica, not to harm her, and that he had stumbled upon the aftermath of a violent act committed by someone else. According to this version, Lucan panicked, believing that his troubled marriage and custody battles would make him the obvious suspect. In fear and confusion, he fled. To supporters, this explanation preserved his character. To investigators, it raised more questions than answers. One of the most troubling aspects was the level of planning implied by the crime. The lead pipe used in the attack was not a random household item. The mailbag used to contain Sandra Rivet's body suggested forethought. The presence of Lucan's car nearby, later found with blood inside, complicated any claim of coincidence. Police were cautious in their language, but increasingly confident in their conclusions. Yet caution turned into paralysis when the primary suspect could not be located. The public reaction was immediate and polarized. Some were fascinated, others outraged. Newspapers ran detailed profiles of Lucan's life, dissecting his habits, his friendships, his finances. His gambling debts became public knowledge, as did his losses at private tables, where thousands of pounds could change hands in a single night. Questions arose about how a man so deeply in debt could maintain his lifestyle, and whether desperation had played a role in what happened. Veronica Lucan, meanwhile, became a controversial figure in her own right. She was scrutinized relentlessly, her mental health questioned, her credibility attacked. Supporters of Lucan painted her as unstable, capable of violence, even dangerous. Critics argued that this narrative conveniently shifted blame away from an aristocrat toward a woman who lacked similar social protection. Through it all, she maintained that Lucan had attacked her and killed the nanny by mistake. Her account remained consistent, though consistency did not shield her from doubt. As weeks passed without any confirmed sighting, speculation intensified. Reports came in from all over the world. A man resembling Lucan was supposedly seen in Africa, in Australia, in India. Each claim sparked brief excitement before collapsing under scrutiny. Some sightings were honest mistakes. Others were hoaxes. A few were fueled by people who wanted to believe the mystery was still alive. The idea that Lucan had escaped became almost irresistible, feeding into a broader cultural fascination with fugitives who outsmart the system. Behind the scenes, investigators faced obstacles that were rarely acknowledged publicly. Lucan's social circle included influential figures, people accustomed to discretion and loyalty. There were allegations, never proven, that friends had helped him disappear, providing money, contacts, or safe passage. Whether true or not, these suspicions eroded public trust. The case became not just about a murder, but about class, privilege, and whether the rules applied equally to everyone. Sandra Rivet's family watched these developments with quiet anguish. Their daughter and sister had gone to work one evening and never returned. Yet her name was often secondary to Lucan's title in headlines and conversations. She had no wealth, no powerful allies, no voice in the public debate. Her death was discussed in abstract terms, overshadowed by the mystery of a missing nobleman. For them, there was no mystery, only loss. By early 1975, the inquest delivered its conclusion. Lucan was named as the killer of Sandra Rivet. It was a formal acknowledgement of what investigators believed, but it carried no practical consequences. Without a body or a trial, justice remained incomplete. Lucan continued to exist in a legal limbo, neither convicted nor fully absolved, alive in rumor and speculation. As time passed, the story began to shift from news to legend. Lucan became a symbol of unresolved crime, a ghost haunting Britain's conscience. Books were written, documentaries produced, theories multiplied. Some insisted he had taken his own life shortly after fleeing, unable to live with what he had done. Others claimed he had reinvented himself abroad, living quietly under another name. Every new rumor reignited old debates, ensuring that the case never fully faded. Time did not close the case, it stretched it. As the years passed, the absence of Richard John Bingham became heavier than his presence had ever been. Every anniversary of November 7th revived the same questions, replayed the same images, reopened the same wounds. Britain moved on. Governments changed. Streets were renovated. But the story of the Earl of Lucan stayed frozen in the public imagination, suspended between crime and folklore. For Veronica Lucan, there was no escape from the consequences of that night. She lived under constant scrutiny, her credibility debated by strangers who had never met her. She raised the children while carrying the burden of being both survivor and accuser. Her insistence that Lucan was responsible never wavered, yet it brought her little comfort. She was isolated socially, drained emotionally, and marked permanently by the events in the basement of Lower Belgrave Street. The trauma followed her for the rest of her life, shaping how she was seen and how she saw herself. The children grew up in the long shadow of their father's disappearance. They inherited not only his title, but also the unanswered questions attached to it. One of the most unsettling aspects of the case was that legally and emotionally, Lucan remained present. He was missing, not proven dead. His children could not fully mourn him, nor could they reconcile the image of a father they remembered with the man accused of killing their nanny and attacking their mother. Their lives became a balancing act between loyalty, truth, and the need for closure. Public fascination intensified rather than faded. Each reported sighting, no matter how flimsy, was dissected. In South Africa, a man resembling Lucan was said to be living quietly. In Australia, a bar patron sparked rumors. In India, a traveler claimed to have met a British aristocrat in exile. None of these claims held up under investigation, but each added another layer to the myth. Lucan became a character people projected onto strangers, a ghost they wanted to glimpse in crowded places. What disturbed many observers was not just that Lucan had vanished, but that he seemed to have done so successfully. If he had died shortly after fleeing, why was no body ever found? If he had lived, how had he avoided detection for so long? These questions fed a deeper discomfort about privilege. The idea that wealth, connections, and status could erase a man from the system struck at the heart of public trust. Even without proof, the suspicion lingered. In 1999, Veronica Lucan died after years of physical and emotional decline. Her death closed one chapter of the story, but resolved nothing. She took her version of events with her, leaving behind written accounts and recorded interviews that continued to divide opinion. Some saw her as a victim twice over. Others, influenced by old narratives, remained skeptical. The truth, whatever it was, grew harder to reach as first-hand witnesses disappeared. In 2016, more than 4 decades after the murder, Richard John Bingham was declared legally dead. The declaration was procedural, not revelatory. It did not establish where he had gone or what had ultimately happened to him. It simply acknowledged that enough time had passed to presume he was no longer alive. For his son, this meant inheriting the title, a symbolic passing of responsibility tied to unresolved history. Sandra Rivett's legacy remained the quietest and most painful. She did not disappear. She did not leave mysteries behind. She lost her life doing her job, caught in a conflict she did not create and could not escape. Her family never received the clarity or justice that might have eased their grief. In many ways, the enduring obsession with Lucan overshadowed the central tragedy of her death, reducing her to a supporting figure in a story that should have centered on her. The case endures because it refuses to fit neatly into any category. It is not just a murder mystery, not just a disappearance, not just a story of aristocratic downfall. It is a study in power, perception, and the limits of justice. It forces uncomfortable questions about who is believed, who is protected, and whose lives become footnotes. In the end, the disappearance of Lord Lucan may never be fully explained. There may be no final confession, no discovered remains, no document that settles the debate. What remains instead is a haunting absence, a reminder that some stories do not end cleanly. They linger, unresolved, carried forward by memory and speculation. Thanks friends for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Crime Chronicles US for more chilling, unsolved mysteries from across America. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next story.